Okay, let's welcome in our next guest as well. We have Mr. Rakesh Biyani joining us. Great to have you with us, Mr. Biyani. So much to discuss with you, especially the kind of impact that you're seeing as a leading industry player at this time with everything locked down. Of course, consumers will most likely now be wary as well of discretionary spends, while of course fixed costs continue to loom large. Talk to us about, what the initial phase has been like and the kind of impact you've seen on business.
Well, I think, when we look at the clothing industry, it's been almost, a little more than 5 or 6 weeks now since the demand started plummeting, and of course, almost 4 weeks plus now where there's zero sales in the industry. And it's definitely of a significant concern. It was one of the most important or peak periods for summer with all festivities there. And that loss of sale is going to be very, very difficult to manage. There's a significant amount of inventory in the pipeline. And one has to wait and watch as and when the lockdown gets lifted and what kind of demand that will get created thereafter. But I think for all non-essential categories, clothing or otherwise, definitely the concerns are very, very large. And unless the government starts opening up this sector, it is going to become very difficult with every week that goes out in the lockdown period.
Okay, thank you for being so honest with us, Mr. Biyani. And as you said, it's really anyone's guess right now into to what extent this is going to play out. But if one were to hypothesize in terms of what you anticipate on, consumer behavior, when they might return to actually physical malls, are you planning in, any kind of disruptions to address some of these issues, when the lockdown lifts even partially?
I think it's very difficult to say what one should do post the lockdown is lifted. I think there's a very important aspect about managing social distancing, etc., which has to be maintained, which means the fact that we cannot try and drive too much traffic to the stores, and that's something to be avoidable. I would say that almost every single retailer or brand is ready with an online strategy. And ideally, the government should have had permitted online sales now. It doesn't make a difference, you're delivering essential or non-essential. I think there is a demand. There are a lot of kids' clothing, which is in significant demand, babies to baby clothing. So there are a lot of so-called non-essential products, which are essential for different age groups, and that should have been permitted by now, at least for delivery models. But that's also not happened. And I think that in terms of taking decisions in terms of how much do you sort of discount or what do you do to drive traffic, I think it also depends upon what's the impact on the supply chain going forward. How long will it take to revive manufacturing back to its normalcy? I think there are a lot of worries around migrant laborers going back home. Will they come back on time? I think whatever one reads about in the media about the factories which have been allowed to run, it is one believes the fact that it's going to take about 3 to 6 weeks before factory will return back to normalcy. And it's the entire pipeline, the entire supply chain has to sort of get activated for anything to get completed into a finished product. So unless that is ascertained, I don't think so extraordinary demand can be created or should be created. We do have a delayed festive season, which is actually a plus point. And what we have typically seen is that as and when festivity comes in, demand does get revived. And so we're quite hopeful the fact that as we go into September, October, November, including some parts of August, the demand should be there. India is a very well-priced country. Clothing specifically are extremely well priced because we do manufacture 99% of the product within India. So that should be a very big plus point.
Okay. You spoke about inventory earlier, and given that clothing as a commodity is also perishable, how long do you feel it will take, to actually move inventories in warehouses? And would you look at options like heavy discounting, perhaps, which in turn could put further pressure on finances?
I think, as I said, discounting is something which I don't think should be on the agenda today. Because if you start discounting existing product and if you don't have a pipeline for new products, you will have a period where customers returning back to stores and you won't have new products at that point. So without really ascertaining supply chain on new products, one should not be discounting. Plus, also it will be socially irresponsible to do discounting at this stage for two reasons. One, discounting leads to too much traffic to stores. This is something which one wants to avoid today. That would not be in line with the social distancing norms that one needs to adhere to. So that is something that one has to keep in mind. Plus, what we also find is that, specifically the small members and brands that CMI represents, they're very worried that they can't sustain those discounts. They're already losing a lot of money, especially in the MSME sector. And if the larger companies start discounting early, they won't have any chance of making any money on the existing set of inventory. So it's too early to say, will discounts be the way forward? I don't think so. At least that's what I have been able to, whatever interaction I have had with some of the industry leaders. Everybody is not very keen to go into that path. They want to first secure the supply chain, activate it. Once there's certainty on new supplies, specifically for the winter merchandise, because that's what is required. That's going to be important. Secondly, while in many other parts of the world, weather changes dramatically and thus the inventory, fashion inventory can be considered more perishable. In India, we're likely to have hot weather right up to the end of October. That's what typically happens. And in southern India, it's hot almost all throughout the year. So the season changes not across the nation. It's definitely in parts of the country. So the perishability as a challenge is much lesser in this country than compared to others.
Rakesh, but tell me, a grave problem like this also throws up opportunities. For instance, if you just jog your memory to as recent as demonetization, that gave the creation to a mammoth like Paytm. Do you think out of the COVID pandemic as well, we could see some digitization opportunities, something that you may be looking at going online, for instance, for retailers? Do you think is the only way to survive and grow?
I think online has become an important, and I think online was an important channel even prior to the current pandemic issue. So this is a must do. There was a customer who was always willing to shop online, and your presence online was going to become more and more important. Majority of the brands, large or small, either through marketplace operation or through their own websites or shops or apps, have been having an online presence. I think everybody is quite geared to be able to service more and more customers at home. Definitely that's the case. So I don't see a challenge with that. And I'm not too sure, it's too early to say that, it's the end of the retail stores. That's unlikely to be the case. I hope not. I think the earlier we have people return back to shopping streets and malls, the country that we knew and the way people celebrated, I think that's what we really need to go back to.
Right. But nonetheless, at large, do you see enhanced levels of investment when it comes to tech and retail?
I think any reasonably well-run retail company or an apparel company would have a significant investment already done in technology. I think this online thing has been going on for like 4 years now. What could change definitely is the fact that if people are doing 2% or 5% or 10% of their sales only online, maybe it will double in the interim, maybe it will triple in the interim. Will it remain at that level? It's too early to say. But yes, digital presence will help secure new customers and will ensure the fact that in the tough times ahead, when social distancing norms, etc., need to be there, and there will be fear among consumers about going into public spaces. I would say that having an online presence will definitely be of advantage.
Obvious thing, Rakesh, that comes to your mind is whether or not retailers will go back and now renegotiate their rentals with mall owners. Do you think that's an eventuality?
I think it's a if you really think for any retailer today, rent may be the single largest cost item on their P&L. And the next would be people, followed by power, etc. That's the sort of pecking order when it comes to cost. The way one is trying to think through is the fact that one has to sort of work together in this partnership with the malls and figure out as to how do we sort of firstly make the malls a safe environment, get the customers back. And I personally believe the fact that as compared to high streets, malls can do a far better job in creating a more safer environment in the current times. And so the malls should ideally be the first place where shopping should be allowed to be opened up. It's no-brainer as far as I think there. So, and as till the time the mall doesn't revive back to the original level, I think it is going to be some time before the restaurants can operate at full capacity, the retail stores can operate at full capacity, the multiplexes can operate at full capacity, events and can happen at the malls. Till that time, there will be a subdued environment in the malls, and it is only in everybody's interest that we have the retail stores remain open. We sort of ensure the fact that there is no cash flow stress across the entire industry. But the malls are also sort of having a difficult time. Even they have certain financial liabilities and commitments. They have certain operating costs. And I think as long as the retailers and the malls can work together, there can be a plan which could sort of make the entire industry more viable. Yes, I think that, some of this would require certain regulatory intervention, especially from the Reserve Bank of India, to allow certain longer period moratorium, because it's anybody's guess right now saying that it may take anything between 9 to 18 months before we could see the normalcy back in the malls. And if that's the case, the current moratorium period may not be adequate for the mall or the retailers as such. And as long as this is sort of showcased to the authorities, I'm sure we would get the support, and which would make retail survive.
Right. Okay, Mr. Biyani, appreciate you taking the time this morning. I just have one last question before we have to hit a break. But if we do see it take that long, to sort of play out, estimates are saying that revenues in the industry may be impacted 30 to 50% over Q2 to Q4 FY21. What are the kind of capital requirements that retailers will have to survive? And do you see increasing debt and leverage concerns at a time when banks are also turning cautious, on new loans? What do you see in terms of, for a well-capitalized retailer? Is there an advantage here? What are some of the concerns on that front? You've already talked about how a package is really necessary for relief, but give us a sense of the kind of damage that could be done here.
I think the total capital that would be required, it's going to vary for different companies. And, I think if all legs are taken care of, that means if the mall gets what it requires, which means the fact that there's a relief to the retailer in terms of what outflow it needs to do, the entire stress is divided across the entire value chain. And if that happens, if I talk specifically about retailers, I think as long as the retailers are able to get about 30% additional working capital over and above what they were drawing maybe as on the 31st of March, then if that remains in place for about 9 to 12 months, with a window to repay over 6 months thereafter, then this would be easily managed there. But if there is no relief to the landlords, etc., then this creates the capital requirement is going to be too large, and the hit would be very high. But this is where the problem lies today. So it's early to say how this will react. But I think what we have seen globally is the fact that everybody has recognized that retail is significantly impacted. It's definitely among the most impacted industries today across the world. Yes, so is the case in India. And a significant intervention is required. And this time the intervention is not about just the smaller retailer, but it's about large and small, all are impacted at the same level. That's the reality. So if any package is going to address only smaller guys or the medium and small enterprises, it may not help. I think what we need to do is to be able to understand that everybody is impacted, small or big, and the package that has to come in has to address all of them.
All right, Mr. Biyani, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Great to hear from you, and hope we can speak again soon as